Hello, everybody. Here we are. This is number, I think, 244. That's a lot, right? Okay. Let's see what we got here. So, my Tokayo, I believe that's my Tokayo. I think he changed his name. He says, how long does it usually take to adjust to a new mouthpiece? And I would like to say that it doesn't take at all. I would like to say that if you have to adjust to it, it's probably not the right size for you. This is my experience. If it's the right mouthpiece, it should just play. That's what we're looking for. When we buy a mouthpiece, we want something that already works. There should be no adjustment period. I guess the exception to that, back when the Monet mouthpieces first came out, they would say that the Monet mouthpiece plays so different you have to get used to it first. So I only ever tried a Monet mouthpiece once. It was not my size, so I didn't use it. I tried it because I bought it in one of the local music stores was going out of business, and I went there and I bought stuff that I thought for sure I can turn around and sell on eBay, and that worked out really well for me. So Angela says greetings. Hello, Angela. Nice to see you. Hello, Mr. Derek. And Karen says my internet connections are awful today, but I will try to stay connected. Well, welcome, Karen. Always nice to see you guys. Angela says I use a Bach 5C. My trumpet teacher says it's best to use the mouthpiece that you're comfortable with. I would agree with that. But comfort, I'll tell you what. Okay, so comfortable with the way I approach this, comfort is for the rim size. But I have to say that because if you look at my teeth, which I won't show you, but you can see when I'm talking, my teeth are very crooked. And so when we talk about comfort, that's what I mean by comfort. I've got three corners. I want the circle inside diameter to go around those three corners. Otherwise, it's very, very uncomfortable for me. So to the point where I bleed. So, yeah. Now, I was poking around on my website and I used to have a student from Russia named Mikhail. And he left a question a few weeks ago, maybe even farther back. So let me go to his question real quick. I'm very embarrassed that I didn't catch it. I kind of have stopped going to the Q and A page. There he is. How to play subtone like Till Bronner. Well, I've never heard Till Bronner do a subtone, but I can tell you how my approach to the subtones. We call them whisper tones, right? Maybe subtones is something different. Now that I'm thinking about it, it might actually be something different from a whisper tone. But let's talk about whisper tones just in case. Um, so for playing super soft, there's a certain amount of tension that has to be in the lips, but the lips have to be. For me, when I do it, it feels like the lips are slightly open, right? But firm. And you want to have a very good airstream. And I mean, um, this is why we practice whisper tones, is because the air control it takes to make one happen is it's it's the height of everything we would ever do for on the trumpet for control of the airstream. So we want to have a airstream that comes out slow enough for the volume to be that low. But the problem with playing the airstream that slow is that oftentimes it just stops. So we want to have an airstream that um, is steady but very slow. To me, that's the answer. And so when I do this, now I haven't played today yet. Now I always start with at least like a piano before I go down to the whisper tone. So I'm not quite getting there today, not quite getting there, but you can see um, it takes a lot of control, a lot of control. I have more difficulty with it when I've been practicing than when I haven't been practicing. And I've been practicing a lot lately. Well, more I've I've been practicing more lately than I have in over 2 years. So that's good news. I'm very happy about that. Larry says hello. It's Trumpet Friday. Woohoo! Angela says I feel very comfortable with my mouthpiece. Well, that's good. I have a question. If you are performing classical music, do you bring a B flat and a C trumpet to perform at your gig? Um, I don't have a C trumpet now. And that's a story I've told here on the Q and A a few times. Um, my B flat is such a good instrument. It's such a great instrument that if I have an inferior C trumpet, it's like, what's the point? What's the point? I can transpose from any key to any key. So transposition is not an issue for me. So if the parts are written in C, that's not a problem for me. So what I did was I sold my C trumpet in hopes that someday I could get um, the C trumpet that I wanted, a Blackburn C trumpet. And back when I made this decision, the Blackburn was like $3,000. Now it's more like six. and the the idea that I would ever have another C trumpet gets farther and farther away, more and more inaccessible. And it makes, at this point, I don't play enough classical gigs to justify having a C trumpet. So I know that's not what you're asking. So you bring both. I know guys that bring both. So the classical gigs I do are mostly brass quintet. And the other guy plays the C trumpet and I play the B flat. Actually, he brings both, but he plays more on the C than he does on the B flat. Larry says, buy more Eddie Lewis books so he can get that C trumpet. Oh my, that's funny. Anyway, what other questions do we have? I'm sorry if I ever, with you guys, if I ever don't answer a question, just ask again. Angela says, I didn't practice today because I was cleaning. That falls in line with what I teach, right? I tell people that the music is fourth or fifth on the priority list. And I oftentimes, with the younger students, will tell them if your parents tell you to go take the trash out and you say, no, I'm going to practice, you've got those priorities mixed up. And the reason I teach that stuff is not because I'm preaching and I want people to live better lives and stuff like that. Nope. I believe that when you live according to those priorities, it makes you a better trumpet player. And I won't go into that now, but that's what I believe. So those are the priorities I teach. By the way, because I believe that, that's why we have the different programs um, in our lesson stuff, right? Because we have the weekly lessons, but then we also have the we call it ad hoc lessons. Ad hoc lessons are lessons you take when you're available. And I can't emphasize those priorities if I'm going to hold the students to a different a standard, this whole lesson every week standard. I can't hold the students to that standard if I'm preaching the idea of um, other things are more important. So that's one of the big driving factors behind why we offered the one-off lessons. Now, the one-off lessons have to be um, more expensive because it it takes more work to make that happen. A lot of people don't realize that. They think that it's just, hey, I'm going to show up for a lesson and I'll pay for it. No, it. We have to do the work for you when you have a ad hoc lesson. We have to do the work for you for that one lesson that we would normally do for dozens of lessons for another person, right? Because once you get a weekly lesson, um, you see what I mean? Once you have a weekly spot, that takes a lot of the work out of the equation. Angela says, I get grouchy if I don't practice. It's like taking a shower. If I don't take one, I feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I had that for a long time, and um, when I began to understand that my ability to perform is not reliant on my availability to practice, that changed everything for me. So if I have a day that I don't practice at all, um, it does not bother me one bit because I know nothing has been lost. I don't believe it. So when I talk about the art of accumulative practice, the opposite of accumulative practice is when we believe that we need to, that we must practice every day or else. And so my philosophy is the opposite of that. I do not believe that I need to practice every day. And I know that I listen to a podcast sort of semi regularly, and they're always talking about what losers people are if they don't practice every day. And so I know that there's a lot of people out there that just believe that that's how it is. I call them trumpet worshipers. I know that's kind of offensive, but hear me out. And I'm not, by the way, Angela, I'm not saying that about you. Um, but hear me out about the trumpet worshipers. What is a trumpet worshiper? A trumpet worshiper is somebody that feels like he must practice every day or the trumpet god will punish him. If there isn't this daily worship of the trumpet god, um, worship that we call practicing, if there isn't daily worship of the trumpet god, then the trumpet god will retaliate and make you suck. And it's just not true that God does not exist. There is only one God. The trumpet God does not exist. Um, and there is no reason to behave that way. There's no reason to um, practice every day or else. That doesn't exist. I mean it. That doesn't exist. Mr. Thomas says, speaking of cleaning, I had my trumpet ultrasonically cleaned. Wow, what a difference it has made. That's very interesting. That stuff first came out in the 80s. I remember when it came out, and it was very controversial. It was very controversial. But I remember the way they explained it to me was that the ultrasound cleaning helped the molecules in the metal find their resting spot. And they were talking back then about how the trumpets are made, and there's I, I, I I'm not saying one way or another. I would have to be more active in the process of making instruments to know if what they're saying is true. But so it used to be that they would, like, when they put a part on, right, they would latch it down and then put the solder weld. Well, when you latch it down, there's stress in the middle. Today, they don't do that. Today, when they do the weld, they will lay gently the part they are trying to weld on, let just regular gravity hold it in place, and then they put the weld. That way, there is none of that stress in the middle. Now, what I was told was that these ultrasound things not only clean the instrument, they do clean the instrument, but they also um, align all that metal, the molecules in the middle, so that there's no more stress in the middle. How much of that is true? We talked last week about scams. Um, that one at least sounds reasonable. At least there are some of these things that are not scams. Um, and at least now, have I gotten it done? No, I have not gotten it done. Um, Normally, when I don't get stuff like that, it's because of the price. So, hello, Life Tour You. I don't know. That's an interesting name. Angela says, I'm taking my trumpet to have it cleaned and repaired in July. I have a tiny dent. Oh, that's welcome to the club. I just like to play the trumpet. That's why I practice. I get it. I understand that. She says, no, no, I am not a trumpet worshiper. Well, we know that because you did your cleaning first, right? Nobody who's a trumpet worshiper would have done that. Karen says, I tried working backwards on the high piece and got so tired I could hardly play the next day. That's right. Fortunately, that didn't last and I'm back to normal. I can make it a goal to be able to play it. That's what we want, though. You've heard me say this before. That's what we want. We want on that high piece. We want to use the all the tricks that we've learned for learning music, and the fatigue we get from that is oftentimes far greater than the fatigue we get from the routine. So, and then it's you. You also know this already. After you reach that point of fatigue, it's very important to have a day that you don't do that. No, let me tell you what I changed this week because I am practicing. The excuse I had before was that the dialysis was getting in the way, and that was true, except that it wasn't completely true. It was to a certain extent an excuse. I know that now. So I decided that my traditional structure had to change. You guys know that I do a 3 day rotation, medium, hard, easy, medium, hard, easy, and then take a day off. I decided because of my dialysis schedule, the 2 big days need to be on my days that I'm not on dialysis. So Tuesday is still a big day, but now the other big day is Thursday, where it used to be uh, Friday on, and so I told you that I've been practicing again, but last Friday I tried to practice and I ended up because of dialysis. I'm sure it's the dialysis. I ended up falling asleep and I slept for the time that I was supposed to be practicing. So this week I decided I'm not going to have that happen again. So I changed my overall schedule. So instead of that 3 day rotation, I have now medium, big, and then my smallest day, which is usually on Saturday. I moved Saturday to Wednesday. Then on Thursday, I did what was normally on Friday, and then today I will do. I don't remember which one. Um, Maybe I'll change it even more so that, like today, maybe I'll do the Tyro routine, which would normally have been my Wednesday. And then Thursdays would be on Saturday, which would be for me. Let me see. Yeah, so Saturday would be the player routine. I think I can do that. I think I can make that work. So, this is a good question from Karen. Can I play some of the 10 times in a lower range and take it down? Not for what you're trying to do. And even, I'm just going to say flat out no. However, what you can do to take some of the fatigue off is to alternate. Now, it makes it take longer, but you can play upper register, lower register. Now, that counts as one. Then upper register again, and then lower register again. That counts as two. Upper register again, lower register again. There's your third one. So the low one doesn't count as part of the 10, but it will do a whole lot to keep your chops fresh while you're going through that. In fact, I highly recommend that. I highly recommend it. It will, you know, playing high only makes you tired when you don't have contrasting opportunities to play low. So if you're doing the 10 times thing and there's no low notes in it, then you have to add those low notes. And it's not just good for your chops. It's also the whole octave thing is very good for your playing, like overall. So, hello, Jeffrey. Nice to see you. Come All right. Any other questions? We've had good questions so far. Come here. You can see my little kitten in the background. Hello, Seppo. I enjoyed your video today. I was listening to it while I was writing a book, the tonalization book. I still have editing to do on that, but I enjoyed the video. I sent you an email. I especially enjoyed that trumpet solo. He looks so small. He looks so small compared to how hard the music is. How old is he? Angela says she's got um 4 cats. He's 13 years old. That's an amazing job for um a 13-year-old trumpet player. That's an amazing job. And for a piece like that, you know, I'm gonna go as far as to say, um, I know professional players that can't play that well. I know pros that couldn't do what he did. So that's a really, really nice performance. Very, very nice. Ah, Angela says if they see me pick up my trumpet, they run out of the room. That's how some of my cats are. They don't like it. So yeah, that's an amazing performance for a 13-year-old student. Any other questions? Yeah, obviously. So, Seppo, is he one of your students? Um, or is he just part of the program or what? Larry says, I found the Tom Bowling Bebop Band plays the music of Eddie Lewis. Yeah, isn't that a nice album? That was the album that put me on the roadmap, so to speak. I say roadmap. Um, on the term is put me on the map. So as a jazz player, um, Angela says she just announces, hear ye, it's time for all cats to leave the room." Yeah, Karen says my dog sits beside me when I practice, or sometimes howls from another room. Yeah, I remember that. Very nice dog. Jeffrey says the cats know. Seppo says, can you recommend any pieces like the Heinrich suitable for arranging for wind bands and trumpet ensemble? He is my student. Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know. I would like to say that this is gonna sound um a little egotistic, but my I think my solo piece, which is not quite like that, but it's not as traditional sounding. You know what I mean? But my solo piece, which right now is just trumpet and piano, I think I might have done most of the work already to orchestrate it, but I think it's sort of exciting like that. Angela says, yes, the cats know. Anyway, I have improved a lot since last year. I do trumpet lessons by Zoom. Let me look in my list of solos. I have them all digitized and see if there's anything that stands out for me that could work like that. You know, no, it's not the same. Let me keep looking. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. I'm in the G's, the H's. Um, oh, what did I say? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm looking. No, I don't know. You know what I've been listening to a lot lately is Alvo Part, but I don't think any of that would work that way. Um, I really enjoy Alvo Part's music, so I'll keep that thought in mind. I don't know what made me think that this other thing was a composer. That's the title of the piece. I'm very bad with German or any of that other stuff. I'm sorry. Um, Angela says she's been working with the 50 recreational studies by Sigmund Herring using the metronome, not easy. Sigmund Herring wrote a bunch of really good books. Karen says our band director says that if our practicing always sounds good, we're not practicing the right stuff. Um, I kind of agree and disagree both at the same time. Okay. I think it shouldn't matter what you're playing. What you're practicing should be just a little bit beneath your level. This is what I believe. And that the way you practice it is what makes you tired. And that being tired is what makes you sound not so good. Does that make sense? Angela says it's not horribly difficult, but not easy either. Um, Seppo says if you have any piece available and suitable for arranging for trumpet ensemble and wind bands, I would be interested in those. Yeah, I don't know. I do have that piece that is 12 trumpets. I call it the trumpets of Jubilee. I think that's the closest because it is almost like a symphonic piece. But no, I don't think it would work like that. Blues tunes for solo trumpet, cornet, or flugelhorn. Are you asking me to list some? Um, Blues tunes. Um, so here's the thing about blues. There's jazz blues and then there's blues blues. And so as far as jazz tunes that are blues, um, the way that we play them isn't actually blues. We can add blues elements to the way we play it, but the tune itself is not going to sound like a blues tune. So it's kind of hard to answer that. So there's a bunch of great blues pieces like um like Blue Monk and Straight No Chaser and songs like that. Oh, Texas blues. Ha ha ha. Texas blues. Yeah, I'm not. For a long time, I was listening to Blind Lemon Jefferson and some of the original blues that's associated with Texas. Um, but no, I don't know any of those songs. I wouldn't be able to help you there. I'm sorry. Now, let me tell you what I do know is that the whole, if you guys have ever heard of the Texas tenor, if you've heard of the Texas tenor is, well, actually, it's plural, right? Texas tenors. Texas tenors are tenor sax players from the Dallas area, the Houston area, that played a certain way, and I would go as far as to say, as that certain way was a bit more bluesy than the rest of what jazz was doing at the time. So the Texas tenors are from the bebop era and forward, and yet they played more in what I guess we could say dated style. Um, it wasn't quite beboppy. It was far, far more bluesy. So if I might not be able to recommend a tune, but I would very easily recommend some musicians that play horn that we're talking about Eddie Lockjaw Davis. Let me look up, make sure I don't leave somebody out. Here's a list. Oh, there's a band that calls themselves Texas Tenors. That's really unfortunate. That's really unfortunate. Now my search is going to be all muddled with um, false. Yeah, the whole first page is this country western band. That's very unfortunate. I don't have a problem with. I'm just talking about the Google search. Um, Let me make my search a little bit more. Illinois Jacket, Arnett Cobb. I already say Lockjaw Davis. Yeah, even with the more. Oh, that's because that's sponsored. I'm sorry. Okay, here's. I don't normally go to NPR, but here's NPR's take. Illinois Jacket, Arnett Cobb. By the way, Arnett Cobb was a Houston guy, and a lot of the guys that I work with. In fact, there's a album that. So we just mentioned the Tom Boiling Bebop album, right? The drummer on that album used to play with Arnett Cobb, and he's on the album that Arnett Cobb did with um, Dizzy Gillespie. So my buddy on that Tom Boiling album is also on that famous um, Arnett Cobb album. And what I was about to say is that I have a lot of friends who played um, with Arnett. Then we have Buddy Tate. That's a name I don't know all that well. And then David Fathead Newman. Okay, so the Lockjaw Davis apparently didn't come up. Maybe because he's not a tenor player, but he's part of that group. And I forget the name of the valve trombone player who used to hire all these guys. I forget the name. Um, Let me see if I can do a search for that. Uh, let's see here. He used to be his name on the Houston Jazz Society. I don't see it coming up. Anyway, he was the one that used to hire all these guys in what they used to call a not district, regional band. They used to call them regional bands. These would be bands that would play 2 or 3 states. I think they called them regional bands. Bands that played the region. Um, Anyway, that's you could sort of kind of say that's my connection to the Texas Tenors. Anyway, the Texas Tenors always played more bluesy. Oh yeah, so if you're looking for stuff to play at the blues jams, the last time I had a blues gig was with a band called TC and the Cannonballs. Let me see if they're still around. TC and the Cannonballs. Well, they've got some. YouTube videos. Yes, it looks like they're still around. Anyway, yes, I'm sorry I can't really help you there. So Angela asks, can you play trombone or any other instruments? No, not really. Mr. Derek says, if I might take the liberty to interject, the big band Room Full of Blues has a bunch of CDs and YouTube videos and play that style of blues with a big brass section. That sounds like the band I recorded with. There's uh, a guy that used to play. Actually, there's a video on YouTube of Arnett Cobb playing with this guy I'm talking about, Calvin Owens. If you look up Arnett Cobb on YouTube and Calvin Owens, I'll find it and give you a link. So Calvin hired me to play in the section. So here's that link. Let me see if I can. I'll put the link in here. And Calvin, I first started off just playing low in the section. And it wasn't long before he was giving me all the first parts. And then later, I think I put. I guess you would call me a producer. Um, I wasn't listed as a producer. I might have been listed as a contractor, but he asked me to hire all the guys for the recording session. He had a separate band, but the band didn't always do the recordings. Yeah, so Calvin Owens um, had that same format in his band. It was all blues stuff. What kind of blues stuff? Calvin Owens used to be in B.B. King's band. So genuine rhythm and blues stuff, right? And blues. Um, so he put his own band together, but it was a big band. Trumpets, trombones, saxes, but it was all blues. So that's a great opportunity to look at what some of the guys in Houston do. Um, so I don't know why, but a lot of his stuff never made it onto YouTube. And I wonder if he didn't know, because this was all new stuff, right? I wonder if he didn't know about streaming. Maybe because he did pass away, and maybe he passed away before that was became as simple as it has. I'm looking to put out at least 2 new albums this year. Um, and we're gonna redo all the Jazz Forever albums as well. So there's gonna be a steady flow of new albums coming from my whatever you call it, my artist page. That's a good recommendation, Mr. Derek. Angela says, I want to play with a group, but first I have to become a better trumpet player. Um, that's not always true. It depends, right? It depends on who you're playing with. Sometimes it's worth it to find someone that's at your level and play with that person. There's a lot of stuff that you don't learn. Primarily, the biggest thing, there's other things too, but primarily the biggest thing is rhythm. I have never seen a student learn to play well rhythmically without playing in another band. Playing with other people, I mean. I have never seen it. When you play with other people, the nature of what rhythm is clobbers you on the head. And so, and that's, by the way, that's the most important thing when you play with other people. And that's a catch-22 situation, isn't it? Because if you don't play with other people, you don't develop that because it hasn't clobbered you in the head. I have tried to encourage some of my students to use my play along videos. After all, that's why they're there, to try to kind of jumpstart that ability to play with other people. I don't understand why it's so difficult for them to do that. I really don't get it. And I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing. Okay. Um, but when I say I don't understand, I truly mean that. I don't understand why. Maybe I haven't done a good enough job yet to explain why that's so important. So if you're not going to play with other people, then really you should be doing as many play along videos on YouTube as possible, not just mine. Mine are actually harder because mine don't have that part. It's like music minus one. The first part is not included in the what you're hearing. So when you play along, you're playing along with the first part being missing. So mine are actually harder for that, but it's also better for you. Angela says she does play along with my videos. That's good. When Mr. Derek says, when you play with others, you get dragged up to their level, kicking and screaming. Most community bands have a lot of music teachers in them. That's right. Yeah, he says I meant that in the best of ways. Well, it's true though. Especially, like I said, especially when it comes to the rhythmic thing. Because when we're home playing by ourselves, even if we've got the metronome on, there's no external source telling you, you just messed up. But if you're playing with a band and you get one beat displaced from what the rest of the band is doing, you know it instantly. You have instant feedback. Um, hopefully, if you don't know it, there's something very wrong going on. Okay, if you play with the band and you get a beat or two displaced from the rest of the band, and you can't tell, maybe you shouldn't be playing with a band yet. Maybe you're not ready. But I'm saying that hypothetically because I've never seen it before. Not with a band. I've seen it with more like with duets and stuff like that, where how are you going to know that the other person's off? So yes, it's harder when there's fewer people in the ensemble. But when you're in a band and you get off like that, it becomes strikingly obvious. So yes, you have that instant feedback, and that instant feedback only has to happen for a few rehearsals before you start playing. And you know what? Once that happens, so I have a student who's now in high school, but I started him, I think, in first or second grade. And he didn't play in an ensemble until he was in seventh grade. And his rhythms were always just a little bit off. And it didn't matter. We practice with the metronome, don't practice with the metronome. It didn't matter because there's none of those internal alarms going off to say, you just messed up. You see what I'm saying? And he, I think before he started playing with the school band, he started playing. I've told you guys about him before. He started playing with a Monday night jazz ensemble in his town. And it wasn't but a few weeks later that all of his rhythms were right on the money, even in the lesson when he's playing by himself. Now, now he's got impeccable rhythm because now he plays in all these different ensembles and has done concertos with the orchestra and stuff like that. Now his rhythm is impeccable. I don't think it's a coincidence that that happens after he got into the ensemble, after 5 years or whatever it was of struggling to play rhythms properly on his own. So, yes, something happens when you play with the other people. And I think it has to do with that immediate feedback. The same is almost true for the intonation and the balance and all that stuff. But this is the most dramatic of all of that. This is the most dramatic. Angela says, you're not going to have the metronome at your performance. That's right. That's right. All right, everybody. It looks like we're winding down. Um, Angela says, it's the same. With my church choir, we were singing a song, and the other sopranos were singing the right pitch, but they sang the note values of the altos. Yes, that's the same thing, but in reverse, right? I call that musical independence. We have to be able to do our part correctly, no matter whatever else is going on in the ensemble. I call that musical independence. That's one of the reasons why we play duets, and that's one of the disadvantages of being a internet student is we can't do duets online. Angela says many of them don't read music. Yep. All right, everybody. I guess that's it. Thank you for joining us. Good questions again, as always. Um, God bless you, as always. And I hope you have a great weekend. And we'll see you next time. All right. Have a great week.